Ben Gass, the nominee for Executive Minister for Local Church Ministries. And tonight we will hear from the Reverend James Moos, the nominee for the Executive Minister for Wider Church Ministries. Here to introduce the Reverend Moos is the Reverend Deborah Blood, co-chairperson of the Board of Directors of Wider Church Ministries.
Good evening. It is my great pleasure on behalf of the Wider Church Ministries Board to nominate the Reverend James Moos for election as Executive Minister of the Wider Church Ministries and Officer of the United Church of Christ and co-executive of Global Ministries. Our search committee, very ably chaired by the Reverend Barbara Kirshner-Daniel, is with us on stage this evening. Our ministry was blessed that such a gifted group of people opened themselves to the movement of the Spirit as they received and carefully reviewed a diverse group of profiles. After much thought, discussion, and prayer, the committee presented the Reverend James Moos to the WCM Board of Directors. Our board met with Jim extensively and enthusiastically voted to endorse him as our candidate. Reverend Moos brings to this position a profound love for and understanding of the wider church, both within the United States and throughout the rest of the globe. He brings, in addition, a very strong pastoral presence and competence developed over many years as a local church pastor, most recently in Bismarck, North Dakota. He was also an Air Force chaplain, and he brings a deep theological understanding developed over years of study, including earning a PhD in systematic theology from Princeton Theological Seminary. We know that he is up to the rigors of travel, as we've been told that he spent 3 months in East Timor as a short-term voluntary missionary, sleeping on a bare board raised just a little bit above the ground, without ever voicing a word of complaint. His dedication to the ministry in East Timor has been inspiring, and we know that he will bring equal care and hard work to all of our many partnerships around the world in 80 countries. Jim is a trusted leader within the national setting of the United Church of Christ already. He served on the Wider Church Ministries Board, including chairing its Finance and Budget Committee. More recently, he was the chair of our UCC Executive Council during a particularly sensitive and challenging time. We were graced by his ministry during that time. We are confident that he will bring those leadership skills to the Wider Church Ministries and to our ecumenical partnership with the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. Jim's strength, intelligence, and humility will serve the church well as he and we navigate challenging realities across the globe. We know that his experience with global ministry and wider church ministries, his financial and administrative acumen, his demonstrated leadership skills in the national setting, and his clear sense of vision for our denomination is just what our covenanted ministry needs at this juncture. I present to you with delight and with gratitude the Reverend James Moos.
Imagine what's possible. Imagine is a word with wings. Possible is a word with weight. In the church, both are essential. Spirit-driven imaginations soar high above current reality. They enable us to envision richer and fuller life for all of God's people and for all of creation. But those visions can't be left hanging up in heaven. They've got to be brought down to earth. Possible moves us from the ideal into the real. We need both wings and weight. We are in the midst of the bicentennial celebration of the American Board of Commissioners for Foreign Mission. The American Board continues to be a vital part of the United Church of Christ through wider church ministries and through our Global Ministries partnership with the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. The founding of the American Board shows how imagination and possibility, how wings and weight can intersect. And it shows an interesting interplay of the generations between youth and young adults on the one hand and the church elders on the other. In 1806, 5 students at Williams College, Massachusetts, got caught in a rainstorm. They took shelter under a haystack in a field where they were walking. There they joined in prayer, and they pledged themselves as volunteers in mission. It was the first documented resolution by Americans to engage in foreign mission. How those students at the famous haystack meeting didn't benefit from the wisdom and experience born of many years. They were in their teens and early 20s. Just the right age to be a part of our Council for Youth and Young Adult Ministries. One of their professors later wrote of them, the brevity of the shower, the strangeness of their place of refuge, and the peculiarity of their topic of prayer all took hold of their imaginations. There is a strong linkage between youth and imagination. The young don't possess imagination exclusively, but they have a special relationship to it. When Walt Disney drew his first picture of Mickey Mouse, when Picasso developed Cubism, when Joan of Arc saved France, when Zora Neale Hurston became a shining star in the Harlem Renaissance, when Martin Luther King Jr. assumed leadership in the civil rights movement, when Bill Johnson heard his historic call to ministry, when Sacagawea shepherded Lewis and Clark, when Steve Chen co-founded YouTube, when Dolores Huerta raised her voice on behalf of farm workers, and when Gandhi began his struggle for justice, when all of these and many more marked major innovative accomplishments, they were youth and young adults. Youth is no barrier to what Walter Brueggemann calls the prophetic imagination. To the contrary, it's an asset. So it's not surprising that the impetus for global mission came from undergraduates. But imagination by itself isn't enough. Imagination can easily be disconnected from the reality of life in this world. And when it does, it becomes fantasy. Now, fantasy is okay if your aim is to create cartoon characters, but it's not a basis for effective and faithful action in the church. Those gathered at the haystack meeting knew that. If their vision was to be realized, it had to be embodied. Their wings needed weight. So a few years later, they approached the elders of the General Association of Congregational Ministers of Massachusetts. Now, those elders could have responded by saying, "But we've never done it that way before." But their imaginations sprouted wings, and they helped to refine and define the vision of a global community of faith, and they helped to give that vision institutional weight. Can I use that word, institution? We live in an era in which mistrust and neglect of institutional life is entering the danger zone. Over the past generation, government has been increasingly viewed not as a vehicle for realizing the common good, it's been seen as a barrier to progress and an obstacle to liberty. And the 2008 financial crisis left many of us wondering how much some financial institutions actually know about money. In much of our structural life, there is a crisis of confidence and even of competence. Now, obviously, religious bodies haven't been sailing in calm waters either. A recent Gallup poll indicates that trust in religious institutions is near an all-time low. The population at large has more confidence in the military and in police forces than it has in the Church of Jesus Christ. Now, all institutions fall short of God's realm, and that includes church structures. Therefore, all are subject to prophetic criticism. But imperfection doesn't mean that they're uniformly dispensable. Various kinds of institutions are necessary and they are redeemable. In the church, new forms are beginning to emerge. As my friend and colleague Ben Gass earlier so ably stated, we diminish and downgrade and ignore our common life at great peril. It is essential if we are to engage in faithful action and realize some measure of true community. Apart from various forms of embodiment, our loftiest ideals cannot be brought to bear on present existence. Structures have weight. And the students with a passion for global ministry didn't walk away from those kinds of concerns. Working with the General Association of Congregational Ministers, a new structure came into being, the American Board of Commissioners for Foreign Mission. And existing structures were recreated to accommodate new realities and the fresh callings of the still speaking God. Imagine what's possible. Imagine is a word with wings. Possible is a word with weight. Wings lift us above current reality. Weight keeps us connected to the real needs of God's people and of all of creation. Wings without weight is fantasy. Weight without wings is despair. Both are essential if peace and justice are to be established. The church continually needs to be reformed and transformed, and it takes the faithful imagination to do that. I've noted the special relationship of the young to imagination. Our youth and young adults, our clergy in their 20s and 30s aren't future leaders, not leaders in training. Your gifts and graces are active and needed now. The whole church needs your help in reimagining what we can become and what God is calling us to be. And because of you, new things are already emerging. Again, the faithful imagination isn't the sole domain of the young. Simeon and Anna had it when they recognized God's realm drawing near when the Christ child was brought to the temple. We need both young and old to imagine, to see visions, and to dream dreams. And the fruits of the faithful imagination need to be implemented. They need to be brought to bear on real people and situations. Those with the wisdom of years carry memory and understanding, and those are essential to finding our way forward. We need those gifted with long experience. Again, that's not to say that the young have no calling or responsibility for our collective life. They do. David was a youth when he was anointed as the next king of Israel, and Esther was a young woman when she became queen and saved her people from an evil plot. Different parts of the body of Christ are gifted in ways that are distinctive, but by no means exclusive. Wings and weight are the calling of the whole Church of Jesus Christ in all of its diversity. Young and old, male and female, those with different levels of ability, different orientations and identities, different racial and cultural and economic backgrounds, all are gifted in ways that are essential if we are to move into the future. Now, in light of this, what do you need to know about the nominee for Executive Minister of Wider Church Ministries? One who stands before you. I'll highlight two things. First, I see myself as a hard-nosed realist. In many ways, our church is in a painfully difficult situation. We're all aware that our resources aren't what they once were. Major drops in OCWM, cuts in program and personnel in all settings of the church, waning influence in many quarters. All of that is very real and very painful, and we can't ignore it. 20 years ago, we might have consoled ourselves with the thought that we were in a garden variety institutional slump. We just needed to ride out the storm and we'd enjoy smooth sailing once again. Today, the all too often brutal facts leave us no room for an easygoing optimism. Like Nehemiah returning from exile in Babylon, so we can say to ourselves, you see the trouble we are in. There are very difficult challenges before us and no easy choices. I want you to know that I feel the burden of those challenges. But more importantly, I want you to know that I'm not in despair. And there's no need for any of us to be in despair. We can go forward with the faith and confidence that the journey ahead will be filled not only with challenges, but also with joy and expectation and new opportunities. Furthermore, hard-nosed realism is not the enemy of a lofty idealism. In fact, it necessitates it. Although Nehemiah understood the magnitude of the disaster in his day, he said, "Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem." He could see a new day. United Church of Christ, come, let us build ministries of radical hospitality, of faith and of fellowship, of peace and of justice, and those ministries are already taking shape. Now, I understand that leadership has special responsibilities, and I'm prepared to accept those responsibilities. I've often been asked what my vision for ministry is. I certainly come with lots of ideas, but they will not be dropped down like so many tablets of stone. It will take the faithful imagination of the whole church in all of its diversity to discern the way forward, and it will take the efforts not of the few, but of the many to make it happen. It is my commitment to engage new responsibilities both collegially and covenantally, and in the recognition that God is still speaking to the whole church. In his work, The Cure at Troy, Irish poet Seamus Heaney wrote these celebrated lines. History says, don't hope this side of the grave. But then, once in a lifetime, the longed-for tidal wave of justice can rise up, and hope and history rhyme. Will ours be a time when justice sweeps over the land? Will hope and history rhyme for us? The answers will not be found in the stars. The answers will be found in imaginations that are set on fire by the Spirit of God and in the faithful stewardship of all of our capacities. Imagine what's possible. In order for hope and history to rhyme, we must have wings and we must have weight. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you, Jim.